Welcome back to MsStoryMystery. In this episode, I've got a collection of unsettling stories that all have one thing in common. Something just felt off. From a picnic by a quiet lake that felt a little too quiet, to a night audit shift that took a turn no camera could explain, to the infamous lady of the bank. These are the kind of stories that stick with you. So settle in, turn the volume up, and let's get into it. Years ago, my then husband, our 2-year-old son, and I took a trip to New England to see the fall colors. We were staying at a resort in New Hampshire and doing little day trips from there. It was one of those vacations that felt easy and happy until one particular day. We decided to drive over into Vermont just to explore and maybe pick up some maple syrup. We packed a lunch and figured we'd stop somewhere along the way, hopefully a park, so we could just relax and eat. I was navigating, but to this day, I can't remember exactly where we were. We had wandered into this sleepy little town and were casually looking for a picnic spot. There weren't any obvious parks around, but then my husband spotted a sign for a lake down a nearby road. It seemed promising, so we turned off the main street and headed down this road that wound through a narrow canyon. After maybe a mile or so, it opened up into a quiet little parking lot next to a lake. It was beautiful and completely empty, not a single person around. We got out of the rental car to look around. I remember the picnic area clearly. Older, weathered wood, painted this sort of faded red. And I remember feeling uneasy. There was something off. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it probably gets packed here on the 4th of July. We chose a picnic table and started unpacking our lunch. But as we sat there, that feeling of dread kept growing. I noticed my husband wasn't really focused on eating. He kept scanning the area, watching the woods, the lake, everything except us. Our son was unusually fussy, too, refusing food and squirming. None of it felt right. We finished our meal quickly. Normally, we would have taken a little walk, maybe explored the lake a bit. But instead, my husband looked at me and asked very directly, "Are you done?" I said yes. He stood up and said, "I'd like to get going." I didn't hesitate. I was relieved. We packed up our stuff, tossed the trash, and left in silence, back down that canyon road, back toward town. We finally made it back and turned onto the main road. My husband pulled over and just stopped. We looked at each other, both of us letting out a deep breath we hadn't realized we were holding. And then we talked. He told me he hadn't said anything at the time because he didn't want to scare me, but he'd felt it too. Something was wrong with that place. I told him it had been beautiful, sure, but it was too quiet. He nodded and said, "Exactly, too quiet." And he was right. No people, no birds, no wind, just absolute, unnatural silence. I don't know what it was we felt out there, but whatever it was, all three of us sensed it. Let me start by saying, yes, I still work at this hotel. And yes, we still get some strange visitors now and then. But this story happened during my second or third month working the night audit shift. It's stuck with me ever since. It was a quiet night, and I had just finished running the financial reports. The lobby was empty, lights were bright, and everything felt routine. That's when I heard the front doors open. Now, the front desk is fairly tall, and I was sitting down, so I couldn't immediately see who had walked in. I stood up, expecting either a late check in or maybe a walk in guest. But it wasn't either. Standing just inside the doors was this guy. He looked homeless. Long, greasy hair, old flannel shirt, jeans that had seen better days. He just stood there, staring at me. Didn't say a word, just stood there, still as a stone, eyes locked on me. I asked if he needed help or if he was staying at the hotel. Nothing, not a single word. He didn't move, just kept staring. At this point, I was starting to feel uneasy. So I radioed our overnight maintenance guy, let's call him James. I asked him to come to the front desk, and he said he was on his way. It would take him a minute since he was working out of a closet on the fourth floor, all the way at the other end of the hotel. A moment later, I heard the lobby elevator start coming down. And that's when the man turned. Without saying a word, he walked right out the front doors. By the time James arrived, the guy was gone. I explained what had happened, that someone came in, didn't say a thing, just stared at me until he heard the elevator, then left. James decided to take a walk around the property, just to be sure. We have a strict no trespassing policy, and we wanted to make sure the guy wasn't hanging around. It took him about 20 minutes, but eventually he came back and said he didn't see anyone. He suggested we check the cameras, just in case the guy returned. That way we'd recognize him. So we headed to the back office where the monitors are, rewound the footage, and went to the time the doors opened. And this is where things got weird. We could clearly see the lobby, the doors open. I stood up from my chair, but no one came in. There was no one on the footage. The doors opened on their own. I reacted like someone was there, but the space in front of me was empty. Now, keep in mind, this lobby is brightly lit. There's no way someone could have walked in without being seen. It shook me, and it didn't help that I've heard rumors about deaths in the hotel. Even stories of homeless people found dead in the area. I never paid much attention to those stories until that night. James stayed near the lobby for the rest of the shift, which I was more than fine with. I never saw that man again. But since then, a few other strange things have happened, especially back in that office. Those, though, are stories for another time. I'm from one of those tiny towns you'd only know about if you lived there, or knew someone who did. On the outskirts of town, where the forest starts to take over, there's a narrow, winding back road the locals call the bank. It's the kind of road where, if you see another car coming, you both have to pull over as far as you can and hope for the best. On one side, thick woods. On the other, a steep drop straight down to the creek. Legend says that about 60 years ago, a woman was driving this road late one night, alone. People believe she fell asleep at the wheel. Her car was found wrecked near the creek, mangled almost beyond recognition. But the woman, she was never found. Some say she flew through the windshield into the water. Others claim she stumbled out, dazed and bleeding, and collapsed into the creek herself. Either way, folks say she drowned, and that she's still down there. The creek, they say, is bottomless. That's why her body was never recovered. Not long after, the story started. Drivers began reporting strange sightings. A woman standing on the side of the road after dark, but when they slowed down to check on her, she'd vanish. Some swore she didn't just stand there. Some swore she appeared inside their cars. That's when people started calling her the Lady of the Bank. Fast forward to a few months ago. I had gone to a small gathering out near that area and was planning to take the main road back home, but there'd been a wreck and the road was blocked. I was tired. I felt bad for those in the accident, but I just wanted to get home. So I made the decision to take the bank. I'd driven that road plenty of times, usually during the day, a few times at night, but never alone. I wasn't thinking about the stories that night. My mind was elsewhere, heavy with personal stuff. I had music playing low as I navigated the curves, mostly just watching for deer. Then, out of nowhere, ding, 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 that seat belt warning alarm went off, blaring inside the cabin. My heart jumped as I looked around, confused. The icon was lit up on the dash. Someone in the car wasn't wearing a seatbelt. But I was alone. I double checked my seatbelt. It was fastened, secure. And then, ding, 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 it started again. I glanced over to the passenger seat and nearly fainted. There was someone sitting next to me. All I could make out in that split second was long, dark, wet-looking hair hanging over a face I couldn't see. The figure was just staring forward out the windshield. I screamed and slammed the brakes. The car jolted to a stop, my seatbelt jerking me back. And then, nothing. No one in the seat. The icon was gone. The dinging stopped. Just the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I floored it. I didn't care about deer anymore. I just needed to get the hell off that road. I made it home without another incident, unless you count the full-blown anxiety attack that followed. Since then, I've told a few family members and friends. Every single one of them believes the same thing. The lady of the bank tried to catch a ride that night. And while my heart goes out to her, I won't be taking that road after dark again. This happened a few years ago, and to this day I still can't explain it. I don't know if it was exhaustion, the wine, or something else entirely, but it still creeps into my thoughts now and then. And when it does, it unsettles me in a way I can't quite shake. I was staying at my parents' house at the time, in a little studio space that used to be a garage before they renovated it. It was winter, cold outside, but the room was warm and cozy. I'd had a glass of wine earlier that evening, not enough to be drunk, just enough to feel a little drowsy. It was around 2 in the morning. I was on the phone with my boyfriend at the time, just talking about life, the usual stuff. trying to wind down and clear my head. The room was pitch black, no nightlights, no glow from the street, just pure, heavy darkness. At some point, I got off the bed and laid down on the carpet as we talked. I remember feeling the warmth of the floor beneath me. I was exhausted. And then I noticed something beside me. It looked like a pillow, just this soft, dark shape on the floor right next to me. I couldn't see it clearly, there was no light, but it felt like a pillow or maybe a cushion. Without thinking, I reached out and pulled it close, curling my arms around it like you would with a throw pillow or a blanket. But the second I touched it, everything changed. The warmth in the room was gone. I don't mean it cooled down a little. I mean it dropped instantly, like the air itself had shifted. Heavy, cold, and then this feeling hit me. Not fear, not at first. Sadness. Deep, overwhelming, crushing sadness. And it wasn't mine. It didn't come from me. It was like I had grabbed hold of something that carried its own weight, its own grief, and it wrapped around me. I sat up fast, heart pounding, that sick, sinking feeling still clinging to me. I didn't stop to think. I just ran out of the room. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I went back to check, to try and make some kind of sense out of it. There was nothing there. No pillow, no blanket, nothing where I know I felt something. Was I just exhausted? Did my brain glitch out in the dark? Maybe. But I know what I felt. That shift, that sadness, that cold. It felt like I touched something that didn't want to be touched. When I was about 9 or 10 years old, I spent a few days at my grandparents' house out in the countryside. They lived far away from any real town, just a few scattered houses within walking distance, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. My older brother was living with them at the time, and he had a computer set up in the upstairs room. That was my favorite spot. I'd spend hours up there playing World of Warcraft. One Sunday morning, around 10 or 11, my grandparents were getting ready for church. I didn't feel like going, so I faked being sick, laid it on just enough to convince them. Eventually, they gave in and left me behind. About 15 minutes after they were gone, I heard the front door open. I froze. I hadn't heard a car pull up, no footsteps on the porch, just the door opening. I slipped out of the computer chair and tiptoed toward the stairs to listen. The house was quiet. Then I heard it. Slow, deliberate footsteps on the hardwood floor downstairs. Then they stopped. And what came next was worse than the footsteps. I heard a scraping sound, like someone dragging their fingers slowly across the wall. Not tapping, not knocking, just that gritty, skin on textured paint sound, like they were letting their hand trail along the wall as they moved. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I just stood there, completely frozen. A few seconds passed. Then the footsteps started again. Still slow, still heavy. And then the front door closed. I heard the distinct sound of a key turning in the lock from the outside. That's when I lost it. I ran out onto the upstairs balcony, heart racing, hoping maybe, just maybe, my grandparents had come back. But their car was gone. It wasn't them. Whatever or whoever had come into the house had already left. That house always gave me strange feelings, even before that day, but that was the first time I truly felt it. Something was wrong. Years later, I brought it up with my older brother. He'd lived there longer than I had, and as soon as I mentioned it, he nodded, said he felt it too. He told me about things that happened to him, things he never really told anyone. And not just in the house either, in the woods around it, in the whole area. There's something off about that place. Everyone who spent time there says the same thing. It has a darkness to it, like something lives there that doesn't want to be seen. I bought my first house when I was 22. My son was 4 at the time, and not long after we moved in, my boyfriend and his mother, Ruth, moved in with us. Ruth had been a sheriff's deputy, tough as nails, and my boyfriend, a full-on skeptic. He knew about my family's history with the paranormal, but he never took it seriously. That is, until the night Ruth had an experience she never forgot. It started out like any other night. My boyfriend was out in the garage, which I turned into his man cave. I was in my bedroom reading, and my son had been tucked in for about an hour. Ruth was in the living room on the computer, playing games. Everything seemed normal. Then I heard her yell, "Go to bed!" I figured she was joking around with my boyfriend and didn't think much of it. A minute later, she was laughing with her friends online, talking about the game. Then, slap! Loud enough that I heard it clearly, followed by her yelp. Then another shout, this time louder, sharper, "Go to bed!" Seconds later, I heard her storming down the hallway. I stepped out of my room and saw her standing outside my son's door, completely confused. "What's wrong, Ruth? What was that noise? Did you drop something?" She stared at me and asked, "Has he been asleep this whole time? He didn't just run back here?" I said, "No, he's been out cold for at least an hour. Why?" That's when she told me what happened. She had been sitting at the computer, facing the wall, with her back to the hallway. She felt someone tap her on the back of the head. She assumed it was my son and told him to go to bed. But a little while later, she felt something slap the back of her head, hard. Then she heard footsteps running down the hallway behind her. She asked if I'd come sit with her in the living room, and I did. She went back to her game, and I sat on the couch nearby with a book. From where I was sitting, I had a clear view of the hallway and the kitchen. An hour went by. Then Ruth suddenly said, "Someone just touched my hair." I looked up from my book and kept an eye on the hallway just in case. And that's when I saw it. A small, blonde head. Just the top of it, moving from the hallway into the kitchen. My son is blonde, so I got up thinking he'd gotten out of bed. But when I walked into the kitchen, it was empty. Not a single soul. Ruth called out, "Did you catch him, or is he hiding?" I checked everywhere. Nothing. So we walked down the hall to my son's room, and there he was, still asleep, completely passed out, exactly where I left him. I didn't know 75-year-old women could move that fast, but Ruth ran to go get my boyfriend. and the look on her face said it all. From that moment on, he had no choice but to believe. And that night, it was just the beginning. After that, it was like something in the house had been unlocked. Ruth had more experiences. My boyfriend eventually came face to face with something he couldn't explain. Even after they moved out, the activity never stopped. I've always been used to it. These things seem to follow my family. But for others, it can be a little too much. My ex and I still talk, and to this day, he still brings up what happened in that house. Ruth has passed on now, but honestly, I don't think she ever really left. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. If something gave you chills or reminded you of your own strange experience, leave a comment. I'd love to hear it. And if you're into this kind of thing, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching Miss Story Mystery. I'll see you in the next episode.